I think how it's sort of a dark streak on our nation's history that us, the nation who self-purportedly are the nation of, liberty, freedom, all that nonsense, how we sort of took this group of people, marginalized them, sort of made it so that they weren't exactly as worth the land that they were on,
I'm sad. That's the first thing that comes is that emotion. Like, it's really weird because no one talks about it here. Like, it's like they don't exist. They never existed. And I think of Central Park too. Those rocks in Central Park. It's like the only remnant of that era when they lived there. And
Cheers was awful and abusive. A lot of people didn't support it at the time, but a lot of people required the land, and so it did happen. It's probably one of the more human rights violations that we've done in the United States. But we also transplanted them into areas where Indians were already occupying it as separate tribes, so there was a lot of bloodshed and tension there.
I learned in my African studies class is that when they forcibly removed the Native Americans, it's because they were harboring slaves, fugitive slaves as well, and that also contributed to the problem. So really, it had nothing to do with us wanting to better their community or give them more land. It was really just to help white plantation owners and help whites in the South deal with slave problems and the problems that the indigenous populations were causing. So
I don't know, the people who were here, they didn't want to mix with them. They just didn't want have their culture undermined, mixed with something else, right?
Yeah, I feel like it was just our interests first, and we never really thought about what they wanted to. Not maybe they could have integrated with us, but we didn't decide. We didn't want that, I guess. But all I know. So I don't know. I don't know if we could have done anything else. If that's what
I mean, the thing is, in Latin America, they didn't get rid of them. They just had babies with them. they created a new culture. So it's a really different political decision.
The boarding schools that they were sent to, that's terrible. Sending people to be white in boarding schools, you just can't do that.
Yeah, I think that the cultures that we actually tried to wipe out in modern day, that they're still being completely pushed down. We should try to appreciate them rather than assimilate them with what we created here. We have to appreciate where they came from. They were here first.
And accept them. Not push them out.
Exactly. Back, they were trying to force, get rid of all Native American traditions, and so okay, they would take children from reservations and then teach them about try to teach them American cultures, forced to learn English or different American ways of life, and then they would bring them back to the reservation, but then they would kind of be ostracized because they were different.
I think it's kind of ridiculous that, Native Americans were on the East Coast until 1832, and then Andrew Jackson just kicked them out and sent them to Oklahoma, which, is really where they are now. They're on the worst land in the country. They have some of the worst public schools. They have a high rate of alcoholism, which the federal government has done absolutely nothing to address. All they can really do to earn revenue at this point is to open casinos and things like that, and they don't really have any other options for increasing their income.
Now they have one of the highest alcoholic rates in the country. They're really poverty-stricken. A lot of them have turned to casinos because their tribe status allows them to avoid being taxed, so they get a lot of profit from that. But a lot of Indians are also kind of wow, I'm uncomfortable with this. And it also brings up the subject of Indianness, because you get a certain amount of the profits from the casino if you're 1/16th or 1/8. And so people are starting to get cut out of it and cut out of the tribe for the purpose of profit.
Anytime that subject comes up, I feel really bad.
My family adopted some Native Americans who from a reservation. I think they were somewhere in Minnesota. I'm not really sure. And they had they have fetal alcohol syndrome, and it just like it kind of was a representation of what goes on the reservations, and like I just feel really bad because there's such a difference between like the opportunities that people on the reservations versus outside the reservations. There are 3 Native Americans at like all my family reunions and stuff, and like they'd also foster like different Native Americans that were at like that were dealing with problems at home. So I don't know. They just like this one girl would talk about how her mom like tried to poison her and like crazy things they do for money and stuff. And I guess like just presenting them with positive incentives and like other options for them to do.
And some, I can't say about all, but I know that there's definitely it's out there that there are some reservations where the standard of living, the poverty, the education level is not up to the amount that it is, and you know, if you take demographics across the nation at large.
I think the problem on the reservations right now is poverty and diabetes. They're some of the worst health. They have some of the worst health concerns at the moment right now, like diabetes, and that's from past problems with sugar introduction, and alcoholism is a really big problem, and again poverty, and they all live in really bad conditions on reservations. And I think it's good in the sense that our government gives them the space to practice the beliefs they want, but we also need to help them because we forced them off their land. So I think we can definitely be doing more to help them because they really need the help, and it's not fair that we moved them from their homes and treated them terribly.
Yeah. People, I think that places that are sparsely populated could be given back, but then I mean you face the issue of kicking out the people who live there. I mean it's a slippery slope, you know what I'm saying? Because every people live there now, and you can't kick them off. I mean that's kind of the same thing.
More federal and state support would be important for the infrastructure, but also sort of like maybe reorganizing tribes so it's less about like profit and less about a business and more about like a community. So maybe attempting to separate like the profit that a tribe collects and how it supports the community, but keeping those two connected.
You have things, especially I hear it a lot in like the Redskins, Washington Redskins, about how like they have this name that's sort of like it's you know, it's an old slur for Indians, and there's the argument on the side, well, it's just a traditional football team, you don't want to get rid of tradition. But then there's the side that can be genuinely offensive to some people. I think that's worthy to consider.
I mean, I'm not from here, but like I saw like the teams like drawing like the mascots like being Indians. I was always like shocked by that because like white people like just okay, you're gonna be like the Indians, or like just for a sports team that has nothing to do with Indian culture, that is not respecting them at all.
So I guess I know that the other problem is with the Native American adoption. There's a really big case recently, and this also goes on in like countries like Guatemala with other indigenous populations, but that the tribes and the groups get rights to a child if there's so much like Native American or descendants or Native Americans, even if the family is living in extreme poverty, dads and cousins are alcoholics, they can't afford to feed the kid, they still get rights over the family that may be able to better provide for the kid. I guess it means preserving culture, which I guess in some cases it would be good, some bad, but right now it's definitely not working in the favor of the child more than preserving the culture. So I guess it's just a different way to look at it.